Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm going to be talking about the first two episodes of the show, Sam and Max Freelance Police, called, respectively, The Thing That Wouldn't Stop It, and the second episode ever. This is another one of my viewer request videos. This one was requested by Sasami-chan. So let's get right into it. In a nutshell, Sam and Max are two anthropomorphic animals. Sam is a rabbit, and Max is a dog. Although for some reason, Max is the only one of the pair who feels the need to wear clothes. And they operate, as the title implies, as freelance police. Now, exactly what a freelance police person is not made 100% clear in the first two episodes. And frankly, I think that's sort of the point. It's just a title that they have that Sam and Max can use to go anywhere and do whatever they want. Actually, it's more like do whatever they think is interesting. That seems to be Sam and Max's driving force. They're not really interested in money. They're just terrified of being bored and basically just want to go around and get into stuff, cause trouble, get into fights, shoot off crazy cool weapons. They even basically flat out state as much in the first episode when they're playing around with some flamethrowers. There are some vague references made to a commissioner who sends Sam and Max off on missions from time to time, but we don't see him in these first two episodes, so I really can't comment too much on that. But anyway, the whole freelance police thing is essentially Deus Ex Machina for Sam and Max to go off and have these really crazy adventures. And while this show is actually, I found it to be quite good, as a reviewer, it does present me with a little bit of a problem. I consider my niche, my thing that makes me different than some of the other folks out there who review shows on YouTube, in that I tend to focus on talking about things like characterization, broader themes, the real world implications of things that we see in the shows that I review. Sam and Max, and I don't say this as a knock on the show, doesn't really have that. There's not much going on in terms of characterization. It's pretty much, as I said, Sam and Max, to me at least, seem to be just some adrenaline junkies who like to go off and just have these crazy adventures. There's one thing in episode 1 where Sam even says, "Nothing has tried to kill me in 5 minutes, and it's messing with my head," or words to that effect. And that's fine. The impression I get, and again, I'm basing this entirely on these first two episodes of the show. I do know that Sam and Max started off as a comic book. I even heard about it occasionally back in the 90s, but I never read it, so this is my first real exposure to anything Sam and Max. My feeling is that it's just intended to be a show where, for kids to sit down with that big bowl of sugary cereal on Saturday morning and just, ride the lightning. Let's say that. Boy, I hope ride the lightning isn't a euphemism for drugs. I might be mixing that up with something else. But anyway, let's step away from that train of thought, because that's not going to go anywhere good. Now, that's basically what I feel this show is. However, another good point about this show, and it does do that whole, Saturday morning breakfast cereal thing very well, is that this is also, I think, a show that a lot of adults could enjoy, simply because it does do a wonderful job of taking you back to that feeling when you're 10 years old, it's Saturday morning, and you're plopped down in front of the TV watching cartoons. I mean, some of the best moments of my childhood, and I'm sure many others, were spent in exactly that fashion. But Sam and Max is written on two levels. One is for the kids who want the constant visual stimulation. They want, Sam and Max run around doing crazy things, fighting monsters, going into outer space on a whim, all this other fun stuff. Now, the second level, of course, is more aimed at adults. And, I imagine that's probably for just adults who simply enjoy animation like myself, or folks who would be watching these cartoons with their kids. And for them, there's going to be a lot of shout outs and references and homages to. Honestly, I even had trouble keeping up with all the references to movies that were in the first just the first couple of episodes. And this, I even wrote them down as I was watching. And this is not even a completely full list. But let's see, just in the first episodes alone, we saw references to Ghostbusters, the 60s Batman show, the old Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer holiday special from the 60s. The first episode is entirely a huge riff on John Carpenter's The Thing, which incidentally is a great movie. I don't know so much about that sequel that they supposedly made, but the one from the 80s, yeah, that is totally a great science fiction horror movie. And of course, there were also references to Jaws and Aliens. The second episode, the first part of it, is a huge riff on 2001: A Space Odyssey, featuring an alien who looks suspiciously like Vincent Price. And the third episode is a big riff on the classic Rudyard Kipling novel, The Man Who Would Be King. So, if you're watching this as an adult, you're probably gonna get all of these references, and I certainly did enjoy that. If I can offer one tiny a little bit of criticism, is during the second episode there was actually a bit where a character was speaking in Japanese, and look, folks, I lived in Japan for almost 3 years, so I can get by in Japanese pretty well. And I won't lie, I did notice some errors in what he was saying. In fact, there was a point where the subtitles were saying, okay, you know what? Don't worry about it. If you don't speak Japanese, it's not going to mean anything to you. There were some mistakes in the Japanese used in the show. On the other hand, there were some mistakes in some Japanese used on a kid's show. So I'm not going to get my shorts in a knot like that, all right? But anyway, I just feel, as someone who is reasonably proficient in that language, that I do need to point that out. So anyway, sorry about that. As I said, since there's not really a whole lot going on in terms of characterization and plot and theme, unfortunately, this is probably going to be a little bit shorter than my usual reviews. But there's still at least a little bit more that I want to talk about. The voice cast. Well, I checked the information on the voice cast, and honestly, there are not really any names that I think most people would recognize. In fact, they seem to be folks from the standard stable of the animation studio DeK, who are, if I recall quickly, Toronto-based. And yeah, the most interesting thing I found was the two of the actors had been on the English dub of Sailor Moon. The fellow that plays Max was the voice of Rubius, and that is the role, as near as I could tell, that he is best known for. So, and I certainly don't mean this as a knock on the actors. Honestly, all the voice acting that I heard in these two episodes was quite good. The fellows playing Sam and Max, they really do a very nice job. It's just they're not terribly well-known folks in the voice acting industry. And that is just sort of an unfortunate case. At the time, the 90s, a lot of shows, anime and American shows, were being dubbed in Toronto, and there were a lot of very good Canadian voice actors who really stepped up and delivered some very good performances, and who really honestly just never got the credit they deserve for this. Now, if you're a younger anime fan or an animation fan, you may not quite understand just what things were like for anime fans in the 90s when there was a very vocal debate, in times very heated. Let's be perfectly honest, endless flame war between people who were talking about English voice actors versus Japanese voice actors, and there were people who just, their main thing was just hating endlessly on any voice actor who did any sort of dubbing of anime into English. Now, granted, those people did at times have some pretty good points. There were some pretty terrible performances in those shows too, but there were also a lot of actors who were really doing genuinely good work. But you know what? That's I'm sorry. That's just sort of me reminiscing. But anyway, my point here is that this was made. This was dubbed by some actors up in Canada in Toronto who do genuinely do a good job, and I think that those folks do deserve more credit than they do get. So please forgive that little tangent. Memories of old fandom battles past. In some ways, I'm glad the 90s are long over. But anyway, let's talk about the animation quality in the show. Frankly, I got no complaints. This is really on par with just about anything I would have expected to see animation-wise on TV in 1998. It's certainly up. It's certainly a step up, a small, and I do mean a very small step up over shows from a little bit earlier in the decade, like say Animaniacs or Duckman. But it's certainly nothing that's going to blow you away, especially you're talking about something that was made 14 years ago. So overall, let's sum this up. In terms of quality, there's really I have no complaints about the show. The voice actors, as I rambled on with great length, all do a fine job. The animation is perfectly solid, and the show is something that can be entertaining to both children and adults. Now, so yes, I would consider Sam and Max Freelance Police to be a good quality TV show. So I guess the question now is, am I going to watch more of Sam and Max? Well, here I'm actually genuinely a little bit sad to say no, probably not. And it's not because of anything that is actually wrong with the show. It's just the show is, well, what can I say? It's just a little too Saturday morning breakfast cereal for me. It was really nice to go back and be able to have that experience of being a 10-year-old watching Saturday morning cartoons again. But that's a feeling that as somebody my age, I can really only take in moderation. I hate to say it, but I've slowed down since then. And while it is a good show, it's just a little too hyper for my tastes now as an adult. Again, this is something that is just totally on my personal taste. I don't mean it as a knock on what is genuinely a pretty good show. So anyway, folks, there you have it. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And oh yes, of course, you can also follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And until next time, take care and have a good one.